Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So, One Piece chapter 1089 is out. If you guys haven't checked out that chapter yet, I suggest that you do so because I will be spoiling you. But now that you have, let's begin. We've said this for a while now, but I think we could say it's officially true, yeah? We are in in-game One Piece. I am so happy right now. Like, there's some things that we take for granted and we speculate all the time. You guys know, we speculate about everything. Some things end up being like on point, or at least we're discussing important things that will come up later sometimes. Maybe not so much, maybe looking too much into it, maybe creating things that aren't really there. But I am so glad that we finally have an answer for the hole in Enies Lobby. For me, if you break down the things about One Piece that I like that make it special, maybe you put world building at number 1. Potentially. For me, at the very least, it's close. I am a huge fan of the way that Oda crafts his narrative, and the range of emotions that you experience is as top tier as it gets. People on the outside sometimes have critique about how Oda maybe handles characters. Those people are wrong. It's really just a matter of how much you're capable of and want to look into it. The world of One Piece is a special creation. You should be putting it, when it's all said and done, or even as we're currently doing it, right? One of the best worlds ever created, ever. There is no doubt. Fully fleshed out, immersive, creative, unique worlds are a treasure. And for me, at least, the wackier it is, while still maintaining internal consistency, is like what I like. That is the best. And it is not easy to do. The hole in Enies Lobby has always been one of the most top tier, lingering, mysteries, cool, unique worlds, traits that there are. You can sit down, think about it. I have for 12 years, and every time your mind melts. What are the implications? What are the possibilities? What are the history? How is this happening? And after all this time, now we basically know. So a lot of this is straightforward, I'm sure you guys already know, but let's break it down anyway. It's very clear that Imu and the Gorosei, the world government, have not possessed the power source to their weapon for a very long time. Vegapunk recently developed the Mother Flame, which is a bastard version of the Eternal Flame that we've been hearing about related to the technology of the Void Century. York sent it to them, they plugged it into their, what is now very clearly an ancient weapon, and it worked. But the key difference between the Mother Flame and the Eternal Flame is that the Eternal Flame is eternal. You would have to assume one of the major limitations of the Mother Flame is that it is not eternal. So if the government had a weapon that runs on ancient technology, Void Century technology, the Eternal Flame, if they had the Eternal Flame, they wouldn't need the Mother Flame. So you can presume that this weapon, which they have, has been powered down for a very long time. I also think that you can assume that nobody else aside from Vegapunk has been able to in any way replicate this. Long story short is this weapon is the ancient weapon Uranus. It almost has to be. And the hole in Enies Lobby was created during the Void Century. So with this established and out of the way, man, I'm so hyped up. Again, mind melting, thinking about what happened? What were the circumstances which created the hole in Enies Lobby? What island was formerly there? What conflict surrounded it? Everything, man, I want to know. One of the unique things about Enies Lobby, which, we don't know if it's because of the hole or the ancient weapon Uranus, but Enies Lobby is in constant daylight. There is no nighttime there. So should we expect the same of Lulusia, where it previously was? Is that now an eternal light? Or could this be the difference between the weapon Uranus powered by the Mother Flame or the Eternal Flame? Or if the power source is what causes the light, the Eternal Flame, what is that? Why is that? We have to be getting an answer. I'll be honest, even though we know now what caused Enies Lobby, I feel like there's just as many questions. It was surreal first seeing where Lulusia was previously, and then seeing the consequences of this around the world from every island. I think that I understand the earthquakes, right? You suddenly remove an island from existence, the power of that alone would shake the entire planet. But when it comes to everything else, like, do I really understand this? Does anybody really understand this? I'm not sure. If you told me to predict something beforehand, I would have said, well, Lulusia gets annihilated, and then you have a massive tidal wave and the area effect around that. And I think that we do get glimpses of this tidal wave, although it isn't as crazy as maybe I would have predicted it to be. But then afterwards, things should roughly normalize. we don't really see that. It's stated that the global, all around the global sea level has arisen. So I'm thinking in my mind, like, okay, what are the kind of processes which could lead to rising sea levels? I made a video actually about Enies Lobby a long time ago, and just should be noted here that a lot of people predicted that an ancient weapon created Enies Lobby. But we talked about rising sea levels, we talked about the hole in Enies Lobby being something like a drain in a dam. If you look up videos for a dam's drain, it looks a lot like the hole in Enies Lobby when the dam overflows. This was one of my more creative theories, just because we have Reverse Mountain, right? So we know that the water from all the various blues pours into the Grand Line, but specifically only one half of it. The world, as separated by the Red Line, which acts as a dam, is like two distinct bowls. So one half of the world seems to be filling with water, while the other half maybe not. So we speculated rising sea levels, thus the need for a drain to sort of level it out across the world. This is still really interesting, I just don't know if it works with what we've been given in this chapter. So what are some other ideas? Melting ice caps. Obviously that's not in play with One Piece at all. But in that same video we talked about, well, if the Red Line was destroyed, the landmass, the actual rock structure that is currently outside of the sea, above the sea, if that were to be destroyed, it would go within the sea. First off, it would create a massive tidal wave. Second off, there's just more stuff in the water, so the water level would definitely rise. No different if, for instance, you were to take a bath and get into the water after you filled it up, right? It rises. Everyone understands that. The problem here, though, is that this doesn't really seem to apply with Lulusia and the weapon. The weapon appears to be like drilling a hole through the planet. We're not adding rock or any structure to the water, as far as we are aware. So for now, I'm just kind of assuming that something magical is occurring here, like the weapon displaces space permanently. So assuming that this is true, are there any potential devil fruits that we could look at and be like, aha, there's a power that could be related to this in some way? And really the only thing that jumps out at me is the possibility that this weapon is related to Devil Fruit awakenings. Like, you've literally changed the very nature of this space on the world. But if this were the case, would you see the water levels rise across the world? You know, maybe this could be a factor of the conversation we just had about melting ice caps, how ice is a more condensed version of water, therefore when it freezes, global sea levels lower. But what if water was transformed into its base components, hydrogen and oxygen, essentially making air, or I suppose potentially water vapor? Note here that I am not calling this steam because it does not appear to be hot. I believe that it is true that air takes up a higher total volume than water would. So my mind is trying to create this reality where you have something like a Devil Fruit awakening, which changes the very nature of where the beam hit the planet into water vapor, but it's not hot. But the water vapor expands, yet is fixed in place. I feel like Oda definitely left some clues in this chapter, but I'm not sure what they are. It's almost like empty space has been added to the world of One Piece. What this could mean, though, I just don't know, and I'm not even going to try to pretend to know. But one thing that I don't know, and I wish that I did know, maybe someone in the comments can chime in with better memory than mine, it would make a lot of sense for the island, Enies Lobby itself, which appears to be sitting over nothing. Maybe it's like sitting over something that is more solid than it appears to be. Condensed, highly pressurized air. So essentially what I want to know is, did we see anything or anyone actually fall into the hole? One thing that seems apparent, though, is that the idea of this weapon and what it is clearly capable of doing might have some effect on the general construct of the planet. What I'm talking about here is I'm talking about the Red Line. You now potentially have a reason why the Red Line might be necessary. If it is an unnatural phenomenon, which I believe it to be. Basically, somebody created it. Because in a world which exists with the threat of this weapon, if it was fired off enough, islands would literally fall into the sea. It's like a crazy water-centric Armageddon. The Red Line, comparatively, is not in danger. So if you wanted to, you could go down the rabbit hole here. Is the Red Line reactionary to the existence of the weapon, providing the entire world with a potential place to live in the event that everything floods? Or was the weapon made with this potentially in mind, to cover the world in water? But anyway, just another idea I want to throw out there. This is not obviously very thought out, I would say, but I'm trying to figure it out, and I don't feel like I'm too close. But we know that the eternal flame is supposed to be like the power of the sun. We have a concept in science called dark matter. I don't really want to get into it too much, but it's essentially matter that we can't perceive or does not interact with light. But the common scientific opinion, based on how they've calculated how galaxies would be able to stay together and not fly apart, is that like 95% of the known universe is actually dark matter. This missing mass is required for our calculations of how everything works to check out. But another thing to sort of throw into the pot to think about, and I think about this stuff in general, not just related to One Piece, I think it's really cool, but it's weird that light is both a particle and a wave. And this is a very contradictory thing. Now, if you study it, you know that light is a wave and all of the spectrum of light, etc., right? But to you, as you experience life on the planet, you can't really perceive this. The things which we perceive as like waves are particles that move through some sort of medium, or a force which is manipulated by a medium. I apologize if this comes off as incredibly naive to anybody out there that may be more knowledgeable than myself, but like water waves come to mind, but more so like sound waves. Sound waves, you're talking, it's some sort of force and it travels through the air and the air kind of manipulates it. The wave function then is basically described as how us speaking or sound disrupts the air. But you kind of need a medium for this to make sense in a tangible form, but light is this wave that travels through the vacuum of empty space. By definition, there is no matter there, no medium with which to interact with. So you would think that the light should just travel in a straight line, not a waved line. But I swear guys, there is a point to this, and that point is the rather abstract thought that we could be challenging whether or not the universe is actually comprised of 3 dimensions. More specifically as it pertains to the fictional world of One Piece. But this is an ongoing debate in real science as well. So yeah, 3 dimensions, you should be familiar with them. Length, width, and depth. Everything fits into this space. The idea of 4-dimensional space is actually a pretty common thing. I think I see it most regarding Einstein's relativity. Essentially that time is an additional dimension of space. And this led to the creation of the idea of space-time. But there's other discussions within the topic that we won't get into too much, like Euclidean 4-dimensional space. It is not my intention to bore you with details. All I want to do is sort of explain how we as entities are limited by what we're able to perceive and the way that we're able to perceive it. Like, we take in light rays, and that in how it influences and interacts with everything sort of brings the world to life. We are 3-dimensional creatures living in a 3-dimensional space, but there's potentially more than that, and it's a whole can of worms. But to me, it's interesting to think about the possibility that maybe light interacts with something that is there. We just have no way of contextualizing it. But anyway, I don't want to get myself clowned too much talking about things that I only understand to a degree. The point is that in One Piece, parallel universes, other planes of existences definitely are real. You can think about the mirror world, right? Or Bluno's door fruit. We've speculated recently that Bonnie's devil fruit might allow her to tap into parallel universes. I mean, devil fruits themselves, not just the ones that we've discussed here, change the very nature of the world from a physics sense in a way that is totally unreal. And I guess our main character now has the ability to manifest dreams, which could be a weird yet very real cognitive realm. So Oda definitely uses some of these hypothetical constructs within his story, which helps create the amazing world building. So to go back, right, scientists think that 95% of the universe is comprised of dark matter that does not interact with light. I wonder if the weapon, the eternal flame, is something like light matter. I have no idea if this relates to any current theories. It could just be a One Piece construct, but it's something that, I mean, as a fictional fantasy, science fiction, I could see Oda utilizing. So to continue on this nonsense train, right, we have created some sort of weird foil to dark matter and light matter. But I find this to be kind of an interesting point to discuss this, specifically that we're having reason to, because of Egghead. There's 2 characters in Egghead, which makes this all the more interesting, which is you have Blackbeard present and you have Kizaru, the light dude and the dark dude. I guess it isn't yet confirmed that Blackbeard is an egghead. That's my personal theory, so we're just rolling with that. I think that that's what's going to happen. It could be wrong. But I already 100% believe that at some point in time, Oda is going to give Blackbeard the ability to create a dark space which would act like a dimension. We've in fact already seen something that could be described like this in Blackbeard's black hole ability. Where does the stuff that he sucks in go? Likewise, I wonder what Kizaru's Devil Fruit does when it awakens. We've heard and we've seen in multiple occasions now that Devil Fruit awakening in many cases transforms the world around them into the nature of their fruit. I assume that would be true of Kizaru's fruit. A common theory, right, is that Punk Hazard was transformed by Aokiji and Akainu's duel. I suppose more specifically, both were awakened. So half of the island of Punk Hazard was transformed into magma, the nature of it itself, magma, eternal, forever. So if Logi is awakened in this way, and Kizaru, a light man, awakened, then the area around him would get transformed into light, pure light. And so suddenly, where there was ground, there is now nothing tangible. If Kizaru's awakening were somehow harnessed into a laser beam which drilled through the planet, suddenly you would have a hole. Coincidence or not, this seems like a fairly okay speculation, for the mystery revealed in this chapter, the hole in Eni's lobby in Lulusia, is also kind of a concept that was addressed elsewhere in the chapter, where Sentomaru was talking to Kizaru about how Vegapunk had utilized his powers and tried to recreate them. Vegapunk, as we know, has been highly inspired by the civilization during the Void Century. And by his own admission, he has only been successful in creating knockoff versions, inferior technology to what once was. So you can pretty much apply this straight up, right? Vegapunk researched Kizaru's powers, created a weapon that is the inferior version of what the Ancient Kingdom actually succeeded in doing. What I'm saying is that the weapon that Imu utilized, the ancient weapon Uranus, possesses the ability to fire an awakened Kizaru beam, literally drowning the island of Lulusia in light. So I guess the next logical question is, do we think that it's possible that technology exists which can sort of force an awakening of a devil fruit power? Yes, we do have something like that, although it's not the same. It's been introduced since very early in the story, in my opinion. I don't know if this is confirmed or not, but I believe this in my soul. Chopper's Rumble Ball creates awakened zone fruit users. As a side note, I wonder if Oda's going to utilize this with Luffy now that he is his own. But I do want to dovetail back into other dimensions, other planes of existences, or parallel universes. As far as we are aware, awakenings, devil fruit awakenings, don't actually affect people. So if the weapon was an awakening beam, what happened to the people? That's why I also like this idea of a dimension of light, just like with Blackbeard's black hole, potentially a dimension of darkness. In essence, they are prisons. I've always thought that Eni's lobby, the way that it worked, if somebody was sentenced, that they would just throw people down into the hole. So it could be fitting in that way. I often look at movies as kind of examples of what's on Oda's mind. And I do think that, while not canon mostly, they contain little nuggets which will be relevant to the One Piece story. And in the recent movie film Red, we had Uda World, right? A virtual reality. Uda, using her musical powers, transported people's consciousness to an alternate dimension. And they were trapped there. It's also thematically interesting because Uda's world is basically a dream world. Rephrased, a world of dreams. Specifically Uda's dream. But so here's the thing, Uta has some limitations to her ability. If she falls asleep, everyone that's trapped inside it gets released. If she dies, everyone trapped inside gets released. But otherwise, people are just there forever. We don't know how life would work in there, but it seems like, essentially, it's a whole new existence. Here's a crazy thought. Can you have children inside of the Uta world? And yeah, this is the kind of shit that makes you question whether or not everything is real or not, and what being real actually means. And before, the world of One Piece is literally an alternate dimension, controlled at the behest of some sort of god, just the same way that Uta is the god of Uta world. Also interesting that the two weaknesses of Uta as a god is 1, if she dies, 2, if she falls asleep. Well, the two main antagonists, it appears, of the entire One Piece story have solutions to this problem. Imu doesn't appear like he can die, and Blackbeard can't sleep. But anyway, of course, you might be asking at this point, okay, I might or might not buy what you have just said, but what's the point of it, right? Why is Oda taking the time to create the hole in Enies Lobby in order to delve into parallel universes and things of this nature? Well, the first thing that comes to mind is this might be important to understanding something that will happen in the story. Luffy has consumed the Nika Nika no Mi, which is colloquially referred to as the Sun God Fruit. Luffy's powers allow him to manifest dreams. These dreams change our very understanding of how the world should work. And previously we've compared Luffy's abilities to that of the Devil Fruit, like the Devil Fruit are created from people's desires, from the possibility. It makes you wonder whether the Sun God was the progenitor of all Devil Fruits, because the Devil Fruits seem to, although in specific ways, do what Luffy does. You guys want some tinfoil, man? That is why I'm here. I am here to provide. Are you ready for this? I don't even know how we got here. Why did this happen? What is wrong with me? We have an island in the story called Nakroa, or the Island of Dreams, okay? First off, maybe that could be something related to Luffy's Devil Fruit. That's just like my general speculation, not specific, but we're just going to make this specific for the hell of it because why not, okay? The Island of Dreams cannot be found in the world of One Piece because the world of One Piece is the Island of Dreams. This whole place is an alternate dimension created by the Sun God. Or maybe this is Imu's world. Haven't seen Imu die, haven't seen him sleep, just saying. I know you guys weren't prepared for this. Honestly, I wasn't either, but you could just go off if you wanted to. Why is the Void Century the Void Century? Well, because during the 100-year time span, maybe, the dimension in which everybody existed changed. Maybe sucked into your metaphorical black hole before eventually getting released and returning back to where the people had come from before. But with 100 years of missing history. Or hell, like I said earlier, maybe this is the fantasy world, but for 100 years, they escaped the fantasy. I really don't want to lose anybody, so we're going to move on here, but, just some things to potentially think about. And when it comes to Laugh Tale, you wonder whether the reason it can't be found is because it doesn't exist in three-dimensional space. You add an additional dimension in there that you kind of have to figure out. And if I were to guess, like some of these things I think are maybe unlikely, but if Oda plays with anything, it's time. And we know time, space, Einstein, we've seen Jewelry Bonnie's abilities recently, Toki was highlighted. I just wonder whether Laugh Tale exists in another time. And that would be something that'd be crazy and totally believable. But these are just some thoughts that I had as to, what's the point of it all? Aside from, wow, this is really interesting in the here and now, like how are we going to get closure about it in the future, naturally within the narrative? But I suppose we haven't really talked about the majority of the chapter, and I tend to do that from time to time. I apologize, but I did enjoy the whole freaking chapter. I'm just really, lost in what the hell is going on here with the One Piece world itself. But the interactions between Sentomaru and Kizaru, learning more about Kizaru, how his worldview is really interesting. We're obviously setting up for an incredible battle here, and the way that the Strats were able to extract information from York was surprisingly big brain from them. I know we're used to Luffy's leadership. Clearly he did not inspire this plan. But to go back to Kizaru, obviously what he's about to do should matter to him if he's not totally a psychopath. And he's having this conversation with Sentomaru and he plays it off, but he's also eating a pasta and it seems to be really hot. He's sweating. He's also got his glasses on, and I wonder how unbothered Kizaru really is. And I suppose we will find out. We did a video talking about Aokiji recently, his justice, how that might relate to his character, his story, and how it's played out. But Kizaru's justice is unclear justice, and this has become more clear recently with what he said. It's fascinating for a character who's risen so high in the Marine rankings to be so devoid of freedom. He says, "I am just a cog in the machine." Essentially, he is moved by the forces around him, the laws and interactions which govern the system. So in a sense, Kizaru is devoid of justice, which would, make the unclear moniker very fitting. But like we discussed with Aokiji, I'm curious if Kizaru could get more story. With Aokiji, it was lazy justice, and we talked about lazy being that it wasn't necessarily true, that Aokiji didn't know what to believe, and that froze him. He acted lazy to cover up his indecisiveness. And I wonder if Kizaru can be treated somewhat similarly to maybe redeem him at some point in the future, where we find out what it is that Kizaru himself actually wants, you know? He is a hilarious contradiction in that he is the light man, the fast man, who acts incredibly slow, you know? And just like, was Aokiji really lazy? Is Kizaru really slow? Or does he simply not want to be a part of the system, which he feels like he has no choice but to be? Kizaru to me seems like a person who needs a little bit of belief, a little bit of faith. And Luffy is a kind of a guy who inspires that. But anyway, guys, what is about to happen is going to be wild. This battle couldn't be any more excited for it. The Blackbeard Pirate's presence, I think it's Blackbeard himself. We see a Gorosei here. He's going to interact with the Seraphim, obviously, potentially conversations there. Luffy is ready to go. They're going to use York as a shield. I doubt that it's going to end up being like a total all-out war, but something amazing for sure is on the horizon. Some general expectations, though, that I have is I think that this is potentially a moment that Oda could utilize to really hype up Blackbeard. If Blackbeard is actually here, something that will add to actual feats that we can see in the story, and begin to allow us to better appreciate him as a final boss candidate. And within this, I expect that he will obtain at least one Vegapunk, which Vegapunk, your guess is as good as mine. But I think he takes a Vegapunk. I think the world government gets a Vegapunk, and I think the Strats get a Vegapunk. Everyone gets a Vegapunk. Obviously, I think something happens with Kuma simultaneously with what's happening here, and it'll be fascinating to find out in what way. I think Jewelry Bonnie's importance could be highlighted. In this chapter even, they discuss, the Gorosei mention her as a child, right? Kuma's young daughter, something like that. This is something that we've actually been speculating for the last several months, that Jewelry Bonnie is actually not as old as she presents herself to be. The Jewelry Bonnie that we know is an aged up version of herself. She is younger than that. And we made a tinfoil video the other day about her that you should absolutely go watch. It's just, it'll be entertaining whether you agree or whether you don't. But it's called The Other Imu. I'll go ahead and link it in the description. But I have lots of thoughts about Jewelry Bonnie right now. I'm really curious to see what, if anything, comes from it. But certainly her connection with Kuma being hyped up within this arc, I think, something will happen. I'm also getting massive Enies Lobby vibes right now. Enies Lobby, obviously at the end of that arc, there was a Buster Call. We even brought up the Dendemushi in the chapter. So if we're looking for potential parallels of what's about to happen, consider things that happened in Enies Lobby. I'm not going to throw out any guesses right now, but in retrospect, after we read the chapters, maybe there's some parallels that will become obvious to us. One of the important ones that I feel like Oda could utilize, however, is the sentience of the Going Merry. This could relate to the Thousand Sunny, or it could relate to Vegapunk Creations. Something to think about. But if you boil down the escape from Enies Lobby, it wasn't an escape. It wasn't a battle at the end. They were just trying to get away. And I think that's likely what the Strats are going to attempt to do, and that's what the story is going to be revolving around here. Also, wouldn't be surprised to see something that would be related to Ed War. Ed War was the battle between Roger and Shiki. Shiki looked like he was defeating Roger until a storm suddenly appeared, giving Roger the dub. If a storm suddenly appears, I would not be surprised. I don't know, man. Gut feeling. It could literally be Dragon. Real ones will already know that my mind is full of thoughts of the egg on Gold Roger's ship. Yeah? But yeah, I guess that's what I wanted to discuss today. Obviously at the edge of my seat, just the same as everybody else. But as always, I'm curious as to what you guys think, whether you noticed something from the chapter that I might have missed. Share your thoughts. Check out my books. The Booms Volume 1 and 2 is out. Links in the description as well as pinned in the comments. Like the video, subscribe, click the bell to be notified, join the squad, and as always guys, have a wonderful day.